Alf, it's good to see you back, my friend. We've been doing a lot of interviews on the channel, and we're gonna get back to just a regular old thoughts commentary video here today. We had some grading numbers that did drop. SGC, probably need to talk about a little bit of SGC. And then also, I was just thinking about this morning after I woke up. What's gonna happen with Panini? Will people feel nostalgic for Panini cards? And we're going to talk through this a little bit because I'd love to get the audience's thoughts on this. As now Topps essentially taking over basketball, football in about 6 months. It'll all be underneath the Fanatics Topps umbrella. Good, bad, indifferent? Well, we're going to find out. Before I dive in, make sure to take advantage of $25 off your first PSA order. It is SCD25 at the shipping and billing screen. 1 card minimum to try out PSA SCD25 for $25 off. All right, so the grading data came out. The data came out this month from Ryan over at GemRate, doing the Lord's work over there. And there was one noticeable number that popped up. A lot of it was kind of, grading's still going strong. It certainly is. People are still grading a ton of cards. PSA recently has upped prices, I think, to kind of quell a little bit of that demand, just to kind of keep up on what's going on. There's a little bit of a backlog. But I do think that they are going to get that backlog under control. So they bumped up pricing a couple bucks on bulk, for example. And while I do understand nobody likes paying more for anything, the reality is the demand is just there. I mean, PSA is grading 1.5, 1.4 to 1.6 million cards a month at this point. Million TCG cards a month. The Pokemon craze has really gone ballistic over there at PSA. And I do think in 2025, that is the piece that really caught PSA off guard. And Nat Turner has said it himself that Prismatic Evolutions came out in March-ish time frame, and it just caught PSA off guard. And so been playing catch up a little bit ever since. They upped the prices for TCG, and then they just did here, on sports cards as well, a couple bucks for the bulk stuff. I still think, though, in the long run, they're going to get this under control. There's a lot of new mechanisms that they're putting in place to just get cards in faster, get the thing moving through quicker. So I think the actual capacity at PSA is going to increase here over the next couple of years. I still think that they're in big time growth mode. If you look at kind of what's happening, they're just getting that Florida office with SGC. We'll talk about that in gear and kind of getting some things shifted over. They also have the office in Germany that's going to open up. I believe it's next year, if I heard that correctly. The way that I understand it currently, like the London Fanatics store that takes PSA submissions, pretty sure that all that stuff comes back overseas, over here to North America to be graded. Whereas I'm assuming that once the Germany store opens up, then that stuff just stays on the continent, stays in Europe, just makes logistics a lot easier. And that's the part where I don't think we have the final product yet in place from PSA there. If you look at what's been happening, they have opened up a lot of different doors here over the last 12 to 18 months to take cards in easier from customers, whether that's GameStop, whether that's, InShop Burbank has got a PSA submission center inside their store. There's a variety of different platforms that go directly to PSA. So really, if you look at the last 12 to 18 months, there's a lot of different moves that they've made on the chessboard to get cards in. But now I think we're more in the phase of, okay, just rounding out that capacity, making sure we have enough people to intake orders and all that sort of stuff. It's all happening, but there are going to be a little bit of growing pains, some pain points, I believe, just as we kind of close out 2025, we get into 2026. I do believe that the turnaround times are going to come down over there at PSA. SGC was the big one in the news. Is SGC dead? That is going to be the big question mark moving forward. I think the biggest thing is just a drop off for SGC grading modern cards. If you go back to the pandemic, PSA had to shut down, and Nat Turner then comes in and turns this thing around. There was, 15 million cards in the backlog at PSA. SGC came in, took advantage of that. They were able to grade cards. They had a backlog themselves, but that is really when they made their move to gain in some market share. Beckett really struggled to handle all the incoming submissions. SGC was there for modern cards, helped a lot of people to be able to grade cards out, and they're well known for having top grading talent over there at SGC. And so the biggest rise of their business over the last 4 or 5 years has been in modern, ultra-modern cards. They've always been a well-respected vintage, but that's where they were able to pick up steam, take some market shares. Like, okay, SGC is grading actually a decent amount of ultra-modern cards as they're popping out. They're running specials for new Topps releases. SGC can grade it in 3 to 7 days or 5 to 7 days. Quick turnaround time. A lot of people moved their stuff over to SGC. The SGC falling underneath the collector's umbrella. Now they're sharing resources, and it has been announced, Ryan Hogue did mention it, it is going to be more of a boutique type firm. Been in the middle of crossing over some of that grading talent over to also grade PSA type stuff or move over underneath the PSA side of things. And it does look to me like it's going to mostly be back to kind of what it was going back in time, more vintage cards, just vintage card grader. Because look, there's a lot of vintage card collectors that prefer SGC. I think it goes back to that world where, as Ryan said, a little bit more boutique, but it'll be an opportunity for vintage card collectors to be able to get their vintage stuff done. So I do think that SGC is going to have great turnaround times again, and vintage card collectors will be able to get their cards graded and turned around. As far as values go, I think that vintage is going to hold up okay over there. As far as future values go for SGC slabs, nobody's going to really know that. They have very well-respected vintage graders over there, and I don't think that that changes. I think that people are still going to use them, and I think that those grades are going to hold up. The price points for those particular grades for SGC slabs, I think they're going to hold up just fine in vintage holders. Can't see the future, so I don't know, but I think that the vintage card collectors are going to always respect an SGC slab. Now, there was in the news that there was a repacker that came out saying that they're not going to buy modern, ultra-modern SGC slabs. I think that kind of reverberated through the hobby, like, what's wrong with SGC slabs? But look, if repackers are not going to be buying SGC slabs, resale for ultra-modern slabs takes a hit, for SGC, which there was already a gap there between PSA and SGC for ultra-modern slabs. And it probably means that people are looking for alternatives, and that's to PSA. We have also seen CGC pick up steam over the last couple of months. Some on the sports card side, but their TCG business has really been strong. So CGC, it's really kind of PSA and CGC, it's really interesting because it's similar in comic books. It's similar in graded video games. We now have a two-horse race, essentially, and it's PSA and it's CGC, and kind of their arms, their various arms that grade collectibles. I think we're still in a good spot as far as grading goes. People will always take shots at Beckett. I really like Beckett's slab. It has a strong history. They have a respected slab. The resale value is good for BGS 9.5s especially. And so I think across all four of the major grading companies, there's some shifting around, and the numbers are going to change month by month. But we've still got great options, between the four companies. And then there's other companies as well that people go to outside of the four companies that they enjoy. So as far as third-party grading and authentication goes in 2025, to me, it's never been better. And it might sound like it's just me being an eternal optimist about grading. Grading's not always perfect, but it is an absolute must to have in our hobby. That's just my opinion. I just think that we have to have authentication. We have to have grading. To me, that's just an obvious take for people to have confidence in the market. If you're buying graded cards and graded collectibles, it does help. It makes the hobby better, and it makes the hobby a lot more fun. Adds some additional gamesmanship to trading cards and collectibles, third-party grading and authentication. All right, let's talk about Panini. Topps taking over. They're taking over Fanatics Topps. They're going to have all the licenses here. They have basketball, and they're going to have football too in about 6 months. And I'm just wondering, and I know there's been a lot of collectors/speculators that have been trying to get ahead of this. Is there going to be some future nostalgia for Panini? Now, let me first say that there's certain things about Panini products that drive me nuts, especially over the last few years. And one is the player-worn jersey, or not even just the player-worn, but the jersey that's not associated with any part of planet Earth. I just don't really understand how that's been able to get by. Whereas, Panini used to use a lot of game-used stuff. If you go back to like 2015 Flawless, football, you look at there's a lot of game-used patches and different things that are used in their products, and they just moved away from it over the last few years. But I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about more of just like 2017. This is an example, like light blue Tom Brady. It's a numbered card from 2017. Of course, this is the Mahomes rookie set. I love the design. I know this is really kind of basic, and it's like, it's just a parallel of a color, and there's a million different colors of different parallels in that set and a lot of the other Panini sets. I don't know, though. There's just something about Prism in particular. Prism, whether that's Prism Silvers, or if it's a color match type card like the one that I just showed for Brady, or, I've got Drew Brees, golds. There's a lot of cool gold cards that are Drew Brees because it matches the Saints, or black. There's a variety of optic black. I've got optic black Drew Brees cards that are numbered to 25 that are pretty rare, but they're just really nice looking cards. And look, I think that Topps is going to put out some great looking cards. I think there's going to be some great Topps Chrome, some really cool stuff that comes out of Topps. But I do think that there is going to be nostalgia. People are going to miss some of these releases. Even like a release like Spectra. When I look at a lot of Spectra cards, and I've got a handful, I don't have a truckload of Panini Spectra, but there's some damn cool cards, some great designs. And I'm just curious to see, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, how some of that stuff ages, because I do think that there's a lot of young people, especially. I'm a believer in the cycles of nostalgia, where there's young people that are here today, and it's a much bigger market, frankly, with a lot more options today than when I was a kid. I think in that 15, 20, 25 year mark, there will be that cycle again. And I think it's going to be vicious. I think that there's going to be a lot of vicious in a good way. I mean, I think there's going to be people that get out, people that go and do their own thing and, have families and, go to work and all that sort of thing. But then they're going to hit that 30, 35, 40 age bracket, and that nostalgia, that, that midlife crisis, as I joke about it, will come back. And I think that Panini is going to be looked back fondly. As I mentioned, the patches that are not associated with any player or team or anything like that, I don't think that's going to be looked back on fondly, but there's just going to be cool designs, cool things, just like a lot of people look back on, 90s inserts and 90s cards of this, or 90s cards, or early 2000s that. And I think it's going to happen all over again. I really do. And I've heard people say with Kabooms, I don't agree with this. Brian Gray is going to disagree with me here, but that's a lot of the reason why he's buying the 1 of 1 Kabooms, or the out of 10 Kabooms, or downtowns. I think he's mostly a Kaboom guy. But he looks at those as like the next PMGs. So he's spending big money on those with the thought of this could be this era's version of what a PMG is. I think that's always an interesting thought too. When you look at, hey, if you're holding certain things long term, what is happening today that people are going to care about in 10, 15, 20 years with modern cards? The truth is, of course, with modern, ultra modern releases, that 99% of the cards are going to go down in value. And that was the same in 1990. That was the same in 1998. People talk about, 98 metal and all these great sets that came out. There's still a lot of the cards went down in price, but there are certain things that held up in each era. And that is going to be a debate, I think, that is ongoing for years to come now. What is the stuff that's going to hold up? A lot of product being released by trading card companies across the board, whether it's Panini or Topps or Leaf or Wildcard or any of these manufacturers. What is going to hold up? What are people going to look back on and be like, man, I remember collecting that? And that's where I just think Panini Prism, starting in 2012, I think there's a lot of people that, again, have been trying to get ahead of this. We just saw a sale. It was on Fanatics Collector, one of these auction houses. It was a LeBron James 2012 gold Prism that sold for like $750,000. It's numbered out of 10. But to me, that is somebody that's speculating on what are the important LeBron cards and the important sets. Prism Gold has been one of those that's kind of been put up here on a pedestal. But look, I think for good reason. I wonder if it will have a trickle-down effect to, the people that can't afford the out of 10. Do they go to the tie-dye out of 25? Do they go to the out of 50? Talking about Prism in particular as we move forward. Anyway, I thought it was a fun discussion. Let me know your thoughts, my friends. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.